A TV presenter in Kenya is live reporting on a gruesome murder of Monica Kimani, a young, beautiful, and very successful businesswoman, all while being totally unaware that her own fiancé would soon be connected to the crime. What she also didn't see coming was prosecutors would later connect her as a co-accused suspect for the murder. She would return home only to get into a super heated argument with her fiancé about something unknown, which led him to suddenly attempt ending his own life in front of her. Now, keep in mind, she had no clue what this man had just done. She's clouded with confusion and just wondered what in God's name was really going on with the man I loved. Was he even the same person anymore? I mean, if we're having a heated back and forth, I get, tempers rising and tensions being high, but to shoot yourself in the chest over it is next level. Before she could even respond to this, he basically flees the apartment to one of their neighbors who they're very close with. But what's strange is, what is he even going there for? After doing something like this, it just doesn't really make sense, right? Things are seeming more and more unpredictable and chaotic by the second with this guy. None of these thoughts really mattered, right? Because he kind of needed immediate medical attention, or he might have actually been successful with his impulsive decision to cut his life short. So she and this neighbor friend of theirs rush him to the nearest hospital for treatment. And she's thinking, maybe everything will be okay. They just needed to treat his wounds and make sure that, everything's all right with him. And maybe this could be a funny story they tell each other later, right? So the hospital staff dressed one of his wounds, but before tending to the next bullet injury on his back, they insisted seeing the police report. After all, they claimed that there was 3 thugs who ambushed him at their apartment before shooting him in a robbery. So why wouldn't they have filed one? The problem was, as we know, that never actually happened. But then why not just tell the truth? He lost his senses in the heat of the moment and shot himself after arguing with his fiancée. Simple as that. Or could this have just been kept a secret to avoid suspicion of her fiancé's potential involvement in murdering Monica Kimani the night before? Later, CCTV footage revealed that the TV anchor's fiancé was present at the crime scene on the night of the murder. With this evidence, it seemed like an open and shut case. The dude was acting unstable, being dishonest about his whereabouts, and was caught by CCTV at Monica Kimani's apartment complex. Oh yeah, he's cooked. Except it wasn't that simple to prove, and it's led to many speculations and conspiracies online. There's so much to unpack here because this case illustrates just how unpredictable life can be, even for boss babes. This is the story of Monica Kimani. Hey listeners, real life can be heavy and these stories reflect that, so please check the show notes for specific content warnings related to this episode and for links to support resources. In 1990, Reverend Paul Ngarama and Miriam Kimani gave birth to a beautiful baby girl who they named Monica in Nakuru County, Kenya. She was their firstborn child among 4. And growing up as a daughter of a reverend, Monica's early years were rooted in religious values and was described as a very bright and ambitious student who basically aspired to become a diplomat. This was a young woman who truly seemed to know what she wanted in life. Not only was she intelligent and driven, but she was also friendly and a social butterfly. Her friends adorably named her Monix for short, and they just said she had the best personality. After high school, she attended the Technical University of Kenya for higher education and eventually earned a diploma in international relations. Studying international relations in school was what sparked Monica's passion for business and entrepreneurship, and this shaped her successful career path in South Sudan. Following her college graduation, Monica started working in diplomacy-related jobs, including a position at a Kenyan embassy in South Sudan. At 20, Monica moved to South Sudan with her father in 2010 to basically help him manage his cleaning company. I mean, he did things with corporate buildings largely, and so, it's a lot to handle for someone at his age. She could see her father was getting older, so she thought, okay, it'd be best to take over the business so he could finally get some rest. And honestly, it made a lot of sense, especially since she officially was now the family breadwinner. Her father was very impressed by her work ethic as she gained high-end estate and land investments in prime areas of Nairobi. Because of her multiple businesses, Monica had residences in both Sudan and Kenya. She truly was going after all of her dreams and aspirations, if that wasn't clear enough, okay? And no one was going to get in her way. She worked hard to play hard by traveling outside of the continent on exotic vacations and just living her best life as she should. Now, fate would have it that Monica would meet the love of her life, Yazir Mohammed. Now, Yazir was a Sudanese national described as a big shot manager. He also frequently visited Kenya and other East African countries for his work, which explains how they may have crossed paths. When Yazir visited Monica's family home and introduced himself, her younger brother George described him as a fun-loving but reserved gentleman. In fact, things were going so well that they got engaged. Monica was planning their wedding by choosing the right color theme and finding the perfect venue. She had a clear vision and was eagerly looking forward to becoming his wife. Unfortunately, the young power couple never got to see their special day. As Monica was building her life and career, another key player in this story was about to enter the scene. Monica's younger brother, George, connected her to another student from the Technical University of Kenya, where they studied together in 2012. That student was Joseph Jowie Irungu, who also went by Joey. Now, Joseph was also born in Nakuru County, Kenya on November 20th of 1990. Just like Monica, he too was raised with strong Christian values from the very, very beginning of his childhood and was appreciated by his community. He was described as social, generous, respectful by his family and peers. At church, Joseph served as a committed member who actively participated, further supporting his reputation as this harmless and well-mannered kid. In 2010, Joseph completed secondary school before studying at the Technical University of Kenya, where he basically got a diploma in the hotel and beverage management. Following his college graduation, Joseph moved to Dubai, where he worked as a waiter. He was always passionate about music dating back to his childhood and church upbringing, but eventually put money together to pursue security training abroad instead. He then went through specialized training and gained employment at a private security firm. His first job in Kenya involved the safety and protection of high-profile politicians and celebrities. And I would say, from what we know about his personality so far, that private security didn't exactly align, right, with who he was, but it'll all make sense in a bit. Because on a personal level, Joseph saw himself a bit differently than those in his community and family. Joseph later described himself as a heavy drinker and frequent partygoer. And I get it. Many of us have multiple harmless, different sides to our identity, but his case was different because according to court evidence, he was described as an abrasive man with anger issues, manipulative tendencies, and a double personality. This would explain how he was both a beloved member of his community, yet was also said to be temperamental, especially in his past unstable relationships. His probation officer claimed that Joseph had a history of antisocial, personality patterns, impulsiveness, and thrill-seeking behavior. He added that he used anger and aggression as a means for control. Now, here's some food for thought. Okay, if you post online at all with your real identity, you've already started to create a personal brand for yourself. I mean, I would say most people don't look too deep into it, while others are very serious with what they post online and what they include in their feed. Because what you put out there is going to be perceived by others. And as you continue to add to that collection of content that represents who you are, that becomes your personal brand. As for Joseph, he created a very rugged social media identity by showcasing himself alongside guns and dressing in military attire on his profile, but they've since been removed at the time of this recording from his feed, which is interesting. And while that's definitely a bit strange, considering how he's never actually worked in the regular military of Kenya or any country for that matter, that doesn't necessarily make him a bad person, but it's just so jarringly opposite of who he was described to be, On one side, you have people who grew up with him and were familiar with him in his neighborhood, right, and community. Oh yeah, he was a sweet church boy, loved him, he was very sweet and responsible, whatever. Then you have people who've seen him after his crimes we'll talk about in a bit, who say completely opposite things. And then you see his social media. So it's like, it's strange for sure. Even though this is strange, it didn't really raise red flags because he had no criminal history or charges. While trying to launch his private security firm, he became dependent on his then girlfriend for financial support for over a year because the dude was broke. And this is such a common pattern of cases where you have a broke man that ends up going into relationships to basically be a sugar baby to women. Joseph was also known to be rather mysterious because no one really knew his sources of income he so proudly flaunted on social media. His friends described him to always have dated women who were financially stable and would support his expensive lifestyle. So, I mean, that could be a good guess, right? Like, we're talking travel and regularly swapping out top of the line cars and entertainment. I mean, he was regularly enabled to basically be a sugar baby. And once things would stop working out with one girlfriend who was his personal bank, he went and found another one. I mean, he was going through them like they were maxed out credit cards. And yeah, he had a security job too, but it never seemed to be that reliable enough to explain his lifestyle, which explains why his next girlfriend was a perfect match for him. Joseph's life seemed to take a positive turn when he met Jacque Maribe. Now, she would let him use her car and generally take care of his living expenses, all while he didn't have a regular job at the time. If that setup works for you, then power to you. But to know Jacque was a devoted single mom who worked as a news anchor with a successful television career just kind of sucks, because she was also said to be hardworking and very well regarded in her community. She sounded like a good ass woman. I mean, as they typically do in these situations. And this leech was going to destroy all she built from day one, as scrubs do. And so their relationship thrived. And on Monday, June 30th of 2018, Joseph proposed to Jacque. However, the couple's engagement bliss was short-lived because just a few months later, events would unfold that would shatter their future plans. On Tuesday, September 19th in 2018, Monica arrives at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi at 5:45 p.m. after flying from South Sudan. Her next destination was supposed to be in Dubai on September 20th. There, she planned to conduct business and celebrate her 29th birthday. She calls her brother from the airport to say she arrived in Nairobi and that she plans to travel to Dubai after visiting their mom the next day. Monica's seen on CCTV in the taxi area, and many witnesses would later confirm seeing her at the airport. At 7:30, her taxi drops her off at the Lemuria Gardens apartment in the Kilimani area. So this is where she lives. Before that, though, her taxi driver reported that she made a brief detour to hand off a parcel to a motorcyclist before continuing her route back home. But being that she's a businesswoman, this interaction could very well have just been business related and nothing more. After the taxi drops her off, the apartment security guard checks her in. And y'all, I don't know if it's my anemia or what, because you'd think after an evening flight that she'd be too exhausted to entertain any guests and would call it a night, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm just too much of an introvert, but there would be 3 men to visit her apartment soon after she returned home. The exact times of their arrival were inconsistently documented, but we did our best to paint a clear timeline of events. The first man to arrive is Lee Owen Madala, one of her neighbors. Lee arrives at 8:30 p.m. to deliver a South Sudanese car number plate that she'd given him earlier. There's a few reasons why he might have delivered that license plate. First off, a lot of South Sudanese people do actually live and conduct business in Kenya. So it's not weird at all to see South Sudanese plates around. Plus, these two already knew each other from a social event that he organized in South Sudan. And this whole region was known for a lot of cross-border traffic. Plus, they're neighbors. I mean, so honestly, that kind of favor totally makes sense. I just want to make sure people aren't focused too much on him, because there's a reason why he came over and provided that exchange. She warmly welcomes him in and he gets settled. Soon after that, somebody else knocks. It's her next door neighbor, Mr. Walid, a kind elderly gentleman. After hearing she returned home from her trip, he paid her a visit just to check in on her. He and Monica had a good relationship, so she lets him in and introduces him to her guest. At about 8:45 p.m., her third guest checks into her apartment as Dominic Heron with his ID, except that wasn't his real ID he handed the security guard. Monica knew this quote-unquote Dominic cosplayer from her university days. What she didn't know was that he used a stolen ID he found 2 days before to access her apartment. Dominic was really Joseph Irungu. Now, this whole part confused me since I figured each visitor's name would be given to the actual resident before granting them access, because that's what they do here in the States anyway, but not in this case, okay? Instead of telling her like, oh, you have a Dominic Heron here at the door, do you want me to let them up? They just said, hey, your next guest is here, right? Because the guard's protocol was only to confirm with the residents whether they had a guest visitor or whatever, and that's it. So basically, this fake name was never communicated to Monica, which really sucks because that would have probably raised a red flag for her. So basically, this fake Dominic Heron name was never communicated to Monica, which would have probably made her pause a bit, especially considering how intelligent she was. I think had it been shared with her up front, she may have actually taken a moment and go, well, what's up with the fake name when you're just visiting my place? Like, that's not normal. You know, wouldn't you guys do the same? I would. I don't know. That's just crazy to me. While sources confirm Joseph was at Monica's apartment, they don't specify the exact reason for his invitation, which is so frustrating because I really wish I could have understood why he was there in the first place. You know, Mr. Waleed made sense. Lee Owens, you know, made sense because he had to exchange the license plate or whatever. And she probably needed him to hurry up and do that quickly because she was about to leave again. So it made sense for those two to be there. But for him, it's just like, the mystery is crazy in this case. Anyway, Monica grants him access to her home on the third floor of the building under the pretense that he's showing up as Joseph. Now, when he shows up, he immediately makes himself very comfortable, hugs her, wastes no time heading into her kitchen, and pours a glass of wine. She took a good look at Joseph and felt like his appearance was a little off, like sort of dressing as if, you know, he was outside of the norm. Now, even though they weren't exactly besties, she knew him well enough to be a bit puzzled in that moment by it. For his outfit, he wore a kanzu, a gray jacket, and a maroon cap. A kanzu basically is a robe or a tunic in Swahili, and it's long, white, or typically cream colored. And what's more notable here is that they're usually worn in Muslim regions of Kenya, so not exactly where they currently were. And from what she could recall, he wasn't even Muslim. So she finally goes, why has he worn a kanzu today? Don't they usually wear that? They meaning Muslims. He never wears such clothes. But he explains, oh yeah, this attire is due to a security exercise in Lamu, and that, you know, he basically had to rent a house in East Ley for security operations. Both places are areas with significant Muslim populations, just so you know, which could explain why he was wearing those clothes, but still a little strange. Lastly, at 9:20 p.m., a fourth person that she connects with is a security guard named Anthony. Now, he's the only person who doesn't actually enter her apartment that night. Instead, she meets him in the parking lot and they chat there for about 5 minutes before she heads back inside to her apartment. We don't know what exactly her and the security guard were talking about or discussing, but she did mention to him that she had important guests over and needed to hurry back to them. Little did she know that this would be the last time that she would re-enter her home alive. The group enjoy a few drinks before the older gentleman, Mr. Waleed, leaves for the evening. The three remaining in the apartment, Lee, Joseph, and Monica, continue to drink and discuss topics about security until 10:45. Now at this time, Lee Owens heads out for the night. While Monica and Joseph are left together, Anthony, the security guard whom she met in the parking lot, receives a bizarre text message from Monica's number at 11:09 p.m., which reads, "Come and help me sleep." Confused, Anthony just replied, "Tomorrow." We still have absolutely no explanation why Monica sent him this message or what she really wanted from him, but it does get you thinking. Could she have been subtly pleading for help at this point or something like that? I mean, I don't know. A protected witness attests that Joseph didn't leave her apartment until 11:21 in a silver Toyota Allion. Thanks to CCTV, you see him in a car with an unidentified male driver before he makes it back to his girlfriend's place. It would later be revealed that this was the same guy who dropped off Joseph at Monica's apartment. His name is Jennings. We'll get to him later. The neighbor and close friend of Joseph and Jacque, named Brian, testified that he got a call through WhatsApp from Joseph at around 1 a.m. on September 20th. Now, he thought it was a bit strange considering how late it was, but what really made it weirder was his actual request. After picking up the call, Joseph asked Brian if he had any paraffin so he could burn some stuff. But Brian replied saying he didn't have any. In the afternoon that same day, Brian met with Joseph and felt that he appeared, quote, disturbed and in deep thought. He asked Joseph if he'd burned what he needed to, and he said that he did. He even showed Brian the trench near the complex of where he ended up burning his items. What a random thing to ask for, right? But okay. The morning after Monica had all of these visitors, Monica's brother, George, is growing restless about his sister because throughout that entire night, he tried to call her multiple times but received no answer. He called her so much that her phone literally went dead. Now he's thinking something absolutely must be wrong since she wasn't responding to his repeated calls. She was just talking to him when she landed in Nairobi yesterday, so it just wasn't like her. Just to be safe, he and his girlfriend headed to her place to conduct a wellness check. They arrive at Monica's apartment at 12 p.m., immediately noticing something unusual. A paper bag with bread left in front of her doorway. It kind of looked like she forgot her delivery order or something, which is a bit odd. But they press on and hear what sounds like running water and noise coming from a TV. The TV must have been cranked up so loud because you can have your TV playing, but if it's inside of a closed room or apartment for that matter, it's kind of hard to hear it from a hallway unless like you have really thin walls. George tries to open the door, but unfortunately it's locked. So he gets the apartment manager to grab a ladder from the gardener so they can gain access through the balcony door of her apartment. Luckily, there's a key hanging next to the window and they use it to open the door. But as soon as they enter the apartment, they immediately notice that no one is in the living room or even the bedroom. They approach the bathroom where the running water noise was coming from, only to find a sight they wish they could unsee. Lying in the bathtub with water still running is a deceased Monica with her neck slit from ear to ear, mouth taped shut, bruises on her waist and hands tied behind her back and feet bound. Semen was reportedly found on her body as well. Besides the bathroom, they also spot bloodstains on the sofa and living room floor. A police report was made right away, and they came to analyze the crime scene before Monica Kimani's body was transported to the mortuary. Monica was only 28 years old at the time of her death and was buried in her family's farm 9 days later. Just like that, their precious daughter with a very promising future was gone. The sides of the road were lined with people as the hearse made its way to her resting place. Several people at her funeral were breaking down as they mourned their loss. Her family, friends from South Sudan, and loved ones eulogized her and called for justice as her beautiful white casket with touches of gold lowered into the ground. As if grieving wasn't enough for the Kimani family, they were also experiencing some significant hardships after losing their highest income earner. Among the financial strain, Monica's mother suffered a stroke from the severe emotional toll that her loss had on her. I think what was just so frustrating is after they viewed her body, it seemed to have triggered all of these symptoms, which is just so tragic and devastating. As hard as she fought to be strong for her family, her prolonged depression caught up with her and her health after losing her only daughter. And guys, this really is going to piss you off, so just get ready. People spread all of these awful rumors online that either Monica or her dad was a billionaire, making yet another attempt to shift the narrative about the reality of the situation. But this also created another huge headache for her father that he had to deal with. So because people had thought they had all of this wealth, Monica's father received all of these threats that forced him to have to leave Kenya. These threats allegedly included unspecified notes, and he was being followed by cars with people who basically demanded tens of millions of shillings from him. All because of that stupid rumor. Even after he denied this bogus allegation, no one believed him, so the threats just kept coming. Then Monica's father was being critically scrutinized by the media with tweets that suggested, he should have reported the threats that he received, as if to kind of like frame him as some shady figure in all of this, which is such a despicable way to treat someone who had just experienced one of the, if not the most worst days of his life. The lack of empathy in the world is so disheartening to see, especially in cases like this. He says in an interview, "I was encouraging myself and told myself I need a break. You become stressed because people who are very close to you are talking badly about your family, and your world becomes so small." He and his whole family had to have so much strength to overcome this isolation from his community and the danger lurking in every corner. With rumors spreading very fast, Monica's younger brother hid from the public eye. And honestly, I don't blame him. They were just being collectively dogpiled, and there didn't seem to be any end in sight. Going back to the 20th of September, the day Monica's body was discovered, Jacque, Joseph's girlfriend, was at the TV station for work, where she basically read off this lunchtime bulletin on live TV. And man, honestly, knowing that her fiance was tied to this breaking news report and watching the actual broadcast clip gives you such an unsettling feeling. But what's even more telling is how so much keeps happening within the same 24 hours after Monica's murder. Like a lot. Much later that evening, Jacque's back home from work, but Joseph's mind starts to unravel. According to Jacque, for whatever reason, the two of them go at it. We don't know what caused the argument or who started it, but whatever it had to be very provocative enough for Joseph to grab a pistol and attempt to end his own life by shooting himself right in the chest. Things escalated very quickly, and the bullet exited from his back before it actually hit a wall. If Jacque ever suspected anything about her man, this was probably the moment where she knew her intuition was right. Injured and realizing his attempt failed, the situation begins to set in for him. So he runs over to their neighbor Brian's unit and asks him to get his gun from Jacque's place after explaining that, he just shot himself. Like, I can't even imagine if that happened to me. Like, I'd be like, what's going on? Am I dreaming? But why would he bother his neighbor with such a request, right? Okay, before all of this went down, Joseph borrowed the gun from Brian. That's how he got it in the first place. Telling him, oh yeah, I need it for a refresher training, whatever that is, So Brian was like, okay, yeah, go ahead. Just, return it in a couple days. Like, not really thinking much of it. Brian seemed like a really good friend, honestly. And now Brian's quickly going to Joseph and Jacque's place to grab the gun along with 28 rounds of 9mm ammo and a spent cartridge. If you were to ask Joseph what actually happened, his testimony would reveal a different side to the story. He confirmed that, he and Jacque did fight, but that she threw his stuff out of her place. And he added that, he was quite drunk at the time and forgot that he had a gun on him, which is how he accidentally shot himself in the chest. Like, who do y'all believe? Honestly, I can't. Either way, Jacque, Brian, and Brian's wife, who was also present at this time, needed to act quickly to get Joseph to see a medical professional and treat his wounds, right? Because if he was going to survive this self-inflicted gunshot wound, they needed to act fast. So they take him to not one, but 3 different hospitals that night. At 1:35 a.m., they make it to Nairobi West Hospital, where he's finally given care. But after assessing the situation, the hospital staff limit Joseph's treatment to dressing only one of his 2 wounds. This was because they required a proper police report before providing further care, which they didn't have. So Joseph's taken back home to nurse his wound until they can actually return with the required police report information. Still, Joseph knows that he can't be left in this condition for too long, so he decides to try something else. Now keep in mind, this entire time, Joseph never gives Jacque or Brian's wife details of him being at Monica's place the night before. Like, he's just banking on them being loyal to him, despite their sheer confusion and state of panic. And honestly, that kind of worked. Later that day, after Jacque returns home from work, she and Brian and Joseph go to the police station to file a police report of a so-called shooting where 3 armed robbers supposedly shot Joseph at his apartment gate, which is like, if I were either Brian or Jacque in this moment, I absolutely would have been grilling him by now, because like, why is he choosing to lie about what happened to literal police instead of just telling them the truth? It just would definitely make me stop and go, wait, what's really going on? Like, I get that they wanted to be loyal, but now you're about to sacrifice your own freedom for something you didn't even do. Just sounds a bit ridiculous to me. But if there wasn't anyone nearby, like, say, I don't know, a watchman on duty, then, this false report might have actually worked. Except there was a watchman working that same area that night. And he denied ever hearing any gunshots or seeing any evidence of the sort after police arrived at the scene to investigate their claims. Yeah, looking a little funny now. But you know what he did share? That a man left Monica's apartment really late that night. And he wasn't the only witness that remembered this man at Monica's apartment. They described his outfit and everything, but without a name, they were still challenged with the delay of identifying who this unknown man was. What was a turning point in the investigation was when the security guard handed them the license plate vehicle description that Joseph arrived in to her apartment. Now they have something to go off of. The cops start searching for the Toyota Allion that was spotted at Monica's apartment. And they found the car was registered to TV journalist Jacque Maribe using the official vehicle registration records. After narrowing down their suspect, they issued a police alert in the Kilimani area. And this was just basically to help trace the car and its driver in hopes of finding the man who was seen leaving Monica's place that night. They were also very close to cracking who this man was. What made it possible was when they got a hold of Jacque and others in her social circle who all confirmed, yeah, Joseph was her fiance. That, on top of the surveillance footage and phone data, all helped place Joseph in Jacque's car at Monica's apartment the night she was murdered. Now, meanwhile, the investigators get Monica's brother, George, to confirm that he knew Joseph from college after showing him his picture. And Monica's first visitor that night, Lee Owens, also ID'd him from a photo as the man he met at Monica's on the night he last was seen at her apartment. Several other witnesses were questioned by the police during the investigation, and among the witnesses, there was a few whose statements stood out. One of them was a close friend of Jacque, who confirmed that she was with Jacque and the governor of Nairobi on the night Monica was murdered. Now, according to her, they were together until around 4 a.m. when Joseph picked Jacque up from a club. And remember, the times that were documented in this case are just kind of like all over the place. So just be mindful of that. This would help Jackie's defense later in the trial. Another important witness was Jennings. Remember the guy I mentioned earlier? He was also Joseph's colleague and was seen driving Jackie's car in the CCTV footage. Now, Jennings revealed that he met up with Joseph at a Kilimani bar from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the night of Monica's murder. During their meeting, Joseph mentioned that he was basically wanting to visit a friend from South Sudan, which we can assume was Monica. They later drove Jackie's car to a gas station where Joseph asked Jennings to wait. Joseph returned around 11 p.m., but said absolutely nothing to him about Monica, which isn't that like a little strange, right? Like, I'm here waiting in a car for you for a few hours to meet up with your mysterious friend. The least you can do is tell me how it went. Like, what happened? Everything go well? No, nothing. He just, I don't know. Maybe I'm too nosy. Now, things were already not looking good for Joseph, okay? During the search of Jackie's place, the investigators uncovered a live bullet beneath the bed. And they also found a bullet hole in the wall camouflaged with literal flour dough. Now hold up, because wasn't the alleged robbery supposed to be at the gate of their apartment and not inside their actual unit, right? Like, investigators were picking up on these blatant contradictions, which started to really pile up. After that, investigators recovered a burned white kanzu, t-shirt, cap, and other clothing from the backyard of Jacque's place. What we know based on Brian's testimony is that Joseph was the one who needed help burning some of these items, but investigators felt that they needed an extension to gather more evidence to build a stronger case against Joseph before filing formal charges. So when police seized Jacque's Toyota Allion, it would be a hotspot of evidence. But the absolute biggest source of evidence would come from the forensic investigators examining Monica's home for DNA samples. Results from these tests wouldn't come until after Joseph's arrest. Still, with the evidence and testimonies they already had, it revealed a clearer timeline and placed suspects at the scene for investigators. And let me tell you, when the police interrogation began, this is where Joseph's stories really start to fall apart. That weekend, police interrogate Brian, Jacque, and Joseph about Monica's death and the alleged shooting when it was clear that the three weren't being 100% honest. Their stories contradicted each other, and when it revealed that the watchmen denied their claims of an armed robbery, their statements did not line up with the evidence. Remember the hole concealed with dough? Joseph says the bullet may have came from Brian's gun, which he claimed to service on occasion, but he gives in a little bit, admitting he lied about being shot by thugs, only to blame the fake story on Brian, his loyal ass friend. Like, I would be so pissed if I was Brian, honestly. Like, we would have to box right then and there. But you see, Joseph claimed that because Brian got his gun illegally, his friend needed to find a way to cover up the story somehow, and allegedly made Joseph make up the story. The next day, on September 25th, Joseph is arrested at Jacque's and transported to the police station, where he denies so much in his statements. Throughout the case, Joseph consistently denies ever knowing Monica. Oh, but data later exposes that this is all a lie. He even denies ever leaving the bar with Jennings that night Monica was killed. But there was so much evidence and witnesses who placed him at her apartment, so that wasn't gonna fly. Now, all of this has become reasonably way too much for Jacque to handle, so she kind of goes missing. Jacque's disappearance started sparking a lot of concern, but she reappears and discloses that she went to her parents' house, explaining to authorities she simply panicked. And honestly, if you really think about it, getting caught in the crossfire was truly gonna gnaw at her mind anyway. I mean, she had nothing to do with any of whatever it was, right, that her fiance may have done at Monica's. She's at this point just kind of like, what the hell is really going on? What are these connections they're making? She just needed to get herself out somehow. So she records a statement at the police office confessing that her fiance shot himself in her home. After all things were considered, both Jacque and Brian were arrested for potentially being accessories to the crime. And this is what I'm saying. Don't ever just be blindly loyal to people, because they will have you looking stupid. 10 days after Joseph's arrest, the DNA analysis results were in. Blood stains found on what was said to be Joseph's brown khaki shorts from Monica's apartments belonged to Monica. Makes you instantly wonder, like, what could have possibly happened in that apartment for her blood to be on his shorts, right? However, what's a little crazy is how his lawyer said those khaki shorts should have had side pockets, but when they were brought into the court during the trial that happens later, they were said to not have any, as if to suggest that they were swapped out. According to the Standard newspaper, there was a 99.9% match to Joseph from the semen found on Monica and other samples under her nails. And then there was reports that a 99.99% match was found between blood-stained fingerprints from other samples and those Joseph gave to the police. 99.9%. I mean, I feel like if you're that close to getting matched from a DNA test, I mean, what can you honestly say at that point? Those matching fingerprints from Joseph were discovered on the tape, rope, and the bathtub from the crime scene. And then there was the phone data, which was also analyzed. It exposed he last communicated with Monica Kimani on September 1st, which means His claim of never really knowing her was called into question. Oh, you just accidentally butt dialed her? You still don't know her? However, an inspector would later testify that the DNA tests collected from Monica still didn't directly link him to the crime scene, which is like, I don't understand that reasoning or logic. In other words, he claimed that Joseph's DNA was quote unquote untraceable on the samples gathered from her place, which just goes to show you how this particular case has so many conflicting reports about whether his DNA was traced back to the scene. This is because some sources say that Joseph's defense team were like, yeah, that DNA, it didn't match Joseph. And if anything, it belonged to two unidentified men, which is definitely interesting, but I don't think it did much to cast doubt on the prosecution's case because the prosecution stayed ready. They presented even more damning evidence and testimonies to charge Joseph in court, which I'll get to here in a bit. Before the trial, Joseph was denied bail, while Jacque was released on a 1 million Kenyan shillings cash bail. At some point, Jacque distanced herself from Joseph after his arrest and throughout the trial. And before you know it, their engagement ended during the legal proceedings. It's good to know Jacque loved herself enough to get the hell up out of there. Although Joseph declined to go into specifics, he admits his high-profile breakup was, quote, full of confusion, and that social media amplified the drama. Now, Joseph spent 500 days in custody, first at Kamiti Maximum Prison and later at Manyani Prison. He appealed the bail ruling and on February 20th of 2020 was granted release on 2 million Kenyan shillings cash bail. But that came with probation terms, restricting his movements to Nakuru County. Basically, they were like, you can't be anywhere near the crime scene nor the key witnesses, which obviously, made a lot of sense. But after his release, y'all, Joseph violated his parole terms by working in Nairobi, claiming that he needed to financially support his daughter and parents. Funny enough, he was never a father and only claimed he had a daughter to help him secure bail. Back while he was still in jail, Joseph got connected to model Eleanor Musangi. She said in an interview that she met him through, quote, a divine intervention during his public trial. And she wasn't shy about being there for Joseph either when his world was crumbling. But she made it crystal clear. She did not know him before the Monica Kimani case. Eleanor said, I lied about being married to protect Joseph for legal reasons because of his court release. She even claimed that they had a daughter together just so he could have a shot at getting bail. She's like the ride or die chick of any convict's dreams. Fast forward, after sitting in jail for 18 months, Joseph is out on bail, no longer living at Jacque's place. He takes himself to Nakuru and becomes official with Eleanor, possibly between late 2019 into 2020. But while out on bail, he screwed up. On March 7th, 2021, he was involved in an assault case after getting in a fight with a man in a Nairobi nightclub. Like, this guy is just a magnet for drama. He claimed that he was too drunk to recall the actual details from that night and only remembered his friend helping him get into a taxi so he could just treat his wounds at a hospital because he got like a cut on his face or something. Yeah, he's not beating these allegations of being the common denominator, dude, like in all of these violent situations, which is why it's so infuriating to me to see some netizens blindly defending him. And if we're being honest here, the fact that he violated his probation made it reasonable to question whether he should have even gotten granted bail in the first place. The relationship Joseph had with Eleanor only lasted about a year. When it ended in December 2020, Eleanor said that she left to focus on herself, her career, and her well-being, which from the look of her Instagram page, that's exactly what she's been doing. And I truly love that for her. Because I don't care what you want to say, no man is worth risking your career or reputation for at all. Always choose yourself first, ladies, please. I know it's not always going to be easy, but she seems to be absolutely flourishing now, which is a huge relief. Even after all that, Eleanor said she had no regrets about helping Joseph when he was down bad. And I just don't know, would you guys actually make the same move or would you dip before things got messy? I know what I would do, because if it was me, he would have got ghosted. He also released several gospel singles reflecting on his experience and claiming a spiritual transformation. You already knew the criminal to Christian pipeline was coming, didn't you? The single is still online and the title translates to Hold Me, where he acknowledges how God held him during tough times. In a podcast interview, Joseph discussed quitting alcohol, focusing on family, and the mental toll of his incarceration. He expressed that there's nothing positive about being in prison and that he wouldn't wish it on anyone. Like, wow. I would have never thought that. Good looking out, Joseph. This sort of performance seemed all good and well to some. But if we're being so for real, the focus on his return to faith, it just seemed like an attempt to garner sympathy and manipulate public opinion, rather than, I don't know, taking accountability for his actions. The trial began and the prosecution presented a staggering 35 witnesses in the Monica Kimani murder case, while the defense didn't call any witnesses. The prosecution presented a case built on what the defense claimed was circumstantial evidence. That's basically like finding evidence that assumes that a person might have been indirectly connected. So when they pointed to the CCTV footage, the fake ID, the burned evidence, Jowie's contradictory statements, their argument was that all of those pieces together pointed to Jowie's guilt. But his defense team was like, that's still all circumstantial. No one actually witnessed him commit the murder, which would be considered direct evidence. And while that may be true, when you hear these next testimonies, it just does not help Joseph's case one bit. During cross-examination, his colleague Jennings testified that Joseph had a gun when he left to meet Monica on the night she was murdered. Already starting on a high note. And also, what would he gain from stating that on the record? This could have been the same gun that Joseph later used on himself when trying to end his life at Jackie's apartment. Joseph's defense insisted on his innocence, claiming that he was being framed. They expressed that there was no clear motive, and as I mentioned before, that the presented evidence was circumstantial. They also said that the prosecution failed to directly link him to the murder weapon. Likely it was a sharp knife object, which was never discovered by the police. On the other hand, Jackie's defense argued that she was totally unaware of the crime and was simply an unfortunate bystander because of her relationship with Joseph. They insisted she couldn't have been held accountable for her boyfriend's actions, especially because she had a solid alibi for the night of the murder. They also said she didn't know Monica Kimani and had no motive to kill her. Not only that, but she couldn't be held responsible for her car's whereabouts when it was in Joseph's possession. The judge's review of the evidence aimed at proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt focused on Joseph's inconsistent narratives, his presence at the crime scene, and his attempted cover-up. The judge concluded that the prosecution established that Monica Kimani's death was unlawful and a homicide. Evidence showed that Joseph had prior phone calls, that's plural, with Monica, and video footage from her home supports this. And while there was no motive ever established, what sealed the deal was that Joseph was the last person seen with Monica alive that evening. The judge cited the manner in which Monica's throat was slit, demonstrated expertise and intent to kill instantly, similar to the skill and precision by someone in the military or with similar training. Finally, the verdict was delivered on February 9th, 2024. Joseph Irungu was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to death for premeditated murder, which his counsel tried to appeal, but a decision hasn't happened yet at the time of this recording. Shortly after the verdict, Joseph's mother shared her disappointment of her son's sentence just minutes after its delivery, insisting that he was innocent. "I believe my son is innocent. He has not done any wrong and has not killed anyone. I believe there is a God of second chances." And as a mother, it isn't really that surprising seeing that she's still sticking beside him, okay? But there were also many others sharing her sentiments. Even with what seems to be an airtight case, some Joseph supporters voiced their thoughts about the circumstantial evidence being unfair and how the death penalty was too harsh of a sentence. For really serious crimes such as murder, the death penalty is still a legal option in some places in Kenya. In reality, though, no executions have actually taken place in the country since 1987. But courts can still issue death sentences regardless of the pause. Someone else added under one of his YouTube interviews, "I even contributed for Joey when he wasn't able to raise the bailout. I always prayed for him." Something that dawned on me after seeing so many people supporting Joseph's defense and bash Monica and her family. If Monica, right, at the time of her death was in a lower socioeconomic background, like, would that have changed their attitudes about her untimely death and the circumstances around it? Because it almost feels like that's why the netizens are so quick to demonize what happened to this innocent, young, and successful woman, right? And her family. It's just another example of how other people project their insecurities onto others. And while many questioned the judge's decision, there were still plenty of others who believed the verdict was a huge win for Monica and her family. Some hope it'll strengthen the fight against violence targeting women in Kenya. The judge, who's a woman herself, shared the statistic that a woman is killed every 2 days in Kenya. It is a terrifying reality that demands attention and action. While in prison, Joseph shared he basically experienced extreme psychological distress. He felt terrified being confined by the walls of his cell and described his experience as draining, not humbling. He says the worst thing about being incarcerated was simply being there, and that there's nothing good with being incarcerated. Yeah, I'd imagine so. As of the date of this recording, Joseph's being held at Kamiti Maximum Prison, a facility known for its really harsh living conditions and serious overcrowding. It's built to house 1,400 prisoners, but now holds over 3,600. And what's wild is how supposedly some netizens made his mugshot go viral because they thought he was good looking, which we know happens in some well-known cases globally. They'd say things like, oh, he's just too handsome to commit this type of crime, which is like so bizarre to say. Someone literally lost their life and that's what you're thinking about? Like, girl, get a grip. I shouldn't have to even say this, but no one is incapable of committing violence or ending someone's life, especially based on something that shallow. Like, come on, y'all. He still maintains his innocence and was shocked and depressed to be known as Monica's murderer. In contrast, Jacque Maribe was acquitted since they didn't have sufficient evidence linking her to the crime outside of her relationship with Joseph. So she definitely dodged a bullet, thankfully. She's since landed a new communication job as of March 2024. And as for Brian, he also wasn't charged with any of the crimes. After hearing the verdict, the Kimani family felt satisfied overall, despite still needing what will be a lifetime of healing. At that point, it had been 6 years since they lost her, which may have honestly felt much longer in reality. Her brother George shared that they were relieved to reach the end of a long journey for justice. Considering how much they went through since her death, they now just wanted to move forward, seeing that judgment has been served. In fact, Monica's father disclosed that their family forgave their daughter's murderer. When I go back to Kenya, I will visit Joey in prison and have a conversation because he is like my son, he stated to Nation Africa. I want this to be part of the reconciliation process among these families, that of Joey, Jacque, and my family. We must preach forgiveness and let this matter rest. The man is a reverend after all. He says that he sought God's guidance after losing his child, and that God told him to forgive Joseph for what he had done. But it was one of the hardest decisions he'd ever have to make. And honestly, he's so much better than so many of us, because I don't know if I could do that. I really don't know if I could. Even though I know Joseph had supporters, I was still very surprised to see just how many followers he had on his social media, specifically his Instagram. But in an interview he had while he was out on bail, he reflected on how his clout happened from dating Jacque Maribe. He talked about how he deletes posts daily to control his image, which explains why so many of those posts of him with guns are no longer up. And the fact that he had no history of criminal charges is still wild to me and makes you wonder, like, what the hell went wrong? We may never know the full truth about this case, and as you dive deeper into it, there are still so many unanswered questions. But learning how Monica's family handled themselves just shows you how strong they were to push through all of this. And I say that because it's really what stands out to me the most. I hate that she had to lose her life though. And unfortunately, there's so many cases like this where young women who are at the peak of their career get taken down, in some ways lose their life because of a man. It doesn't matter where you live. It really doesn't. Also, you could tell Monica meant so much to them, and her spirit still does to this day. And I sincerely hope that her love and spirit continues to live on in each of the lives that she touched. Let me know what your thoughts are about this case in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next Murder Mystery Motherland.